Okay, now we're going to talk about Lev Vygotsky. And actually, he's Russian, so his name's Gotsky. You actually drop the V and the Y and just pronounce it Gotsky. And Gotsky's a pretty brilliant guy. Unfortunately, a lot of the information or research he does in Russia and the psychology over there doesn't actually come to the Americas because of the Cold War until after the Cold War ends in 1991. So now we're very familiar with him and we apply him quite a bit when we talk about learning or coaching or education. So Gotsky comes up with this theory called social developmental theory, which stresses the fundamental role of social interaction in the development of cognitive thinking. So we're talking about how we learn, and this complements a lot of Albert Bandura's ideas on social learning, how we see something modeled and then we act it out. So the way he does this is he actually says, look, the best way for humans to learn is from each other. So coaches, teachers can be very strong leaders, our parents. And I think we saw some of the consequences of this with the pandemic. When we went to like digital learning with children and high school students and middle schoolers, it did not go very well. Most kids struggled with it. And probably the kids that succeeded probably had a parent at home or an adult guiding them or staying on top of them. It's very hard to learn on your own until maybe you get to a much more developed age. And even then, you're still socializing with the technology. Okay? So under his zone of proximal development is this idea of distance between actual development and what we learn. So you see they have a target. So what you learn can be unaided. So what you actually know is the circle. And then the zone, proximity, proximal development is what you can learn with less guidance, and then with direct guidance. And finally, the things that are outside of the target, those are things that you can't learn at this time. I'm not saying you can't learn them yet. You can't learn them yet. It might be outside of your development stage, or it might be outside of your social knowledge, or you're just not there yet. You need more foundation. So, like, for example, I'm a social studies teacher. I could not learn quantum physics tomorrow. I would do terrible in a quantum physics class. My science is not that strong. I would need to take, it's not that I can't learn quantum physics, but I would have to take a lot of science courses to get to that point. So he says that the potential development determines through the problem. So you see, these outer rings are your potential development. And this is unfortunate. He says with collaboration, yes, we can learn quite a bit, but unfortunately, we probably never meet our maximum potential. And that is because of limitations of the environment and the skills. So what a child can do today and assist shall be able to do by herself tomorrow. So this really gets to the core concept of teaching, which is if you give somebody a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime. So that's where maybe some of that terminology comes from. And he kind of shows through his research that has a lot of truth. And we use this term in education all the time called scaffolding. Scaffolding was when a teacher or a mentor helps guide the learners and lets them learn to develop on their own. So you start out kind of low level, and you start with the circle of what they do know, and then you build on that. So remembering, you're just teaching them to remember. And most research is showing we have to learn content and context and verbiage and language. So we have to understand key terms. Then once we start building these key terms, we start understanding how things go together, then we can actually start applying it. So if I teach psychology, we're talking about Vygotsky's idea on proximal development, but right now I'm just defining it for you and trying to help you understand. After this video, hopefully you can actually apply it. You're going to answer questions, or you might look at scenarios or situations where you can apply it and be like, oh, this is definitely in the target. This is outside of the target. This has potential, and this is completely out of the target. Can't reach that, okay? And then analyzing is looking at information and breaking it into pieces and being able to apply it and break it apart. And then we're moving up the pyramid to evaluating. If you really understand something, you start to be able to evaluate. And you could actually give each other feedback, or you could evaluate, is this a good idea? No, I don't think this is a good idea. And you don't have to do all this in order, by the way. But a lot of times it's probably good to start with foundation and move your way up. But we can evaluate something to kind of hook you or bring you in And you could say, I think this stuff is good, and based on the target, which is your circle you actually know. And then by the end, hopefully you could create and evaluate. You could actually go teach and create things with this information. So you could create the target of Vygotsky, and you could apply it to scenarios and talk about it. And you could even think about ways that we could use this in our own lives or in our own systems like school and law enforcement and the judicial system. How can we do this? How could you be good at whatever you do? You want to be a carpenter. You use these ideas. So Vygotsky is very, very brilliant, and he also teaches us that we like to learn when we're having fun. We tend to remember things better when we're having fun. Now, the two levels that are often referred to as actual developmental level versus the potential developmental level. So your actual learning versus your potential. Where it lives up to its potential. The ability depends upon the input from the environment, environmental input, truly optimal. So what you have to understand is the reason that we don't reach our potential, according to Vygotsky, is because, unfortunately, the environment itself is probably not optimal. So while I might be a good teacher, and I might have taught for a while, I don't know everything about Lev Vygotsky's theory of proximal development. I'm getting better at it every time I teach it, and I talk to you guys about it, but it's not optimal. But as time goes on, teachers get better and students learn more. And also there's other things in our environment. There's ways that my job as a teacher is to constantly think about how do I optimize you learning so you learn the most information in the shortest period of time. And that's very challenging. So we rarely under this theory, if ever, can get to the real potential that somebody can learn. Now let's look at Vygotsky versus Piaget. We're not going to go too into this, but I want you to think like Vygotsky's place is more, it's more emphasis on cultural and social cognitive development. Piaget is very developmental. He's very scientific. This is stage 1, sensory motor. Vygotsky is saying, hey, with guidance you can move. Vygotsky assumes cognitive development varies across cultures. So he thinks what we learn and how we learn changes culturally. Piaget thinks it's very scientific. Again, it's very universal. Very different approaches. Vygotsky places considerable more emphasis on social factors, cognitive development. He thinks that the way we talk to each other and how we learn through our environment really limits or makes us succeed. Where Piaget, very scientific, says, no. You go through these stages and things could happen to the stages and maybe you don't do as well as you can, but everybody has to go through these stages. It's very universal. So the zone of proximal development is children, their partners, co-construct knowledge. So when you work with a child, so if your parents talk to you very high level and they show you things and explore the world with you, that's going to really help your development under Vygotsky's theory. Piaget is going to say, yes, that's true, but you have to do things on your own independently, and you have to learn on your own, and a lot of it's is actual genetics, and your body and mind are developing or growing. You see things concretely, and then you become more abstract. You could think about, like the discussion we're having right now is very abstract, very high level, versus if it's concrete, like I'm explaining or showing you 2 + 2 = 4. You can actually see that, and I could show it to you. He puts the role in language. Language is very important under Vygotsky's theory, the way we talk, how we teach each other, we use our vocabulary and our vernacular, teaches and emphasizes certain things. That, again, that goes back to, we talked about last semester about language itself can be kind of like a wall or a box that we're stuck in and that we internalize. We think within our language. So, for example, the Italians have many synonyms for love. Latin language has lots of words for love. In the English language, we only have one word for love. We have different types of love, like brotherly love or motherly love, romantic love, but it's still love. So their culture very much emphasizes love, and they talk about it more, so maybe they think about it more, where our culture, we don't talk about it as much. Our language is very dramatic, so maybe love is not as emphasized in our culture, and that could change our whole world view on love. And Piaget would say, no, this stuff is pretty universal. There might be some differences, but not much. But we really learn from each other under Vygotsky. And you guys could teach each other, and I teach you, And that's really how you can have a lot of a development under his theory. While Piaget is saying that things have to be more directed, and the teachers and the kids have to be structured, they go through certain stages.